Hello guys, welcome to Desmo Garage again. In this video I'm gonna show you how I replace the rear brake fluid on my Ducati. Small addition is that I read a lot of forums and comments about the typical crappy rear brake for Ducatis, and admitting that this floating brake caliper is not a state-of-the-art comparing to the M50 at the front, but frankly speaking, I haven't got any problem with the rear brake. So I can switch on the ABS even on a sticky paved road, but there are a few things we need to consider before we replace the brake fluid and set the brake. There are some features for the brake fluids, and two of them are critical and important from this perspective. These are the boiling points. When you buy a brake fluid, it's got two features, two boiling points, the dry boiling point and the wet boiling point. The dry one is mainly a statistical one because it's valid for the fresh fluid without any kind of moisture absorption. But from the point you open the cap, the fluid starts to absorb the humidity from the air, so this dry boiling point might be valid for a few minutes, hours, up to the moisture in the air. But what is important to us is the wet boiling point. It means that it defines the temperature when the fluid starts boiling, when there is a 3.7% of water absorbed in it by volume. When the fluid is used, it typically contains some amount of moisture because it's not a perfectly dry system. It should be dry, but there is some moisture goes in the fluid, and the boiling point starts to decrease. And when the fluid is worn, it's old, there is enough moisture inside that when you press the brake pedal or pull the brake lever, the water inside starts to boil up because its boiling point is around 100 Celsius. And then you can feel the brake spongy. Sometimes the effectivity of the brake decreases critically. So what I use are two different kind of brake fluids. One is the common .4. I use it for the front brake and the clutch. Its dry boiling point is 267 degrees Celsius, while the wet boiling point is 172 degrees Celsius. For the rear brake, I use a racing brake fluid for which the dry boiling point is 312 degrees Celsius and the wet boiling point is 205 degrees Celsius. Why? Because if you check your rear brake system, you can see that the hoses run relatively near to the mid pipe. And the mid pipe contains the catalytic converter, and it creates a huge amount of heat. So it puts the base temperature of the brake fluid higher than for the front and for the clutch. Of course, clutch is not a real load. So we have got less gap before the used fluid would reach the wet boiling point. And then it's easier to warm out the fluid, so it's advised to replace it more frequently. The usual time period now is 3 years, but the common changing period for the brake fluids is 2 years. I replace the rear brake fluid in every year because the racing ones are told to worn out more easily, I don't know, but it's not a big amount of money to keep my rear brake healthy and effective. My bike's rear brake caliper is an upside down mounted version. It means that the bleeding screw is not at the highest point of the brake caliper, but almost at the lowest. Well, it's the lowest point. So when you replace the fluid and you are not sure about the condition of it, the usual process is to remove the rear wheel, remove the brake caliper, put it in the position that the bleeding screw would be at the top of it. But yeah, it's an additional process, and I know that my brake is in good condition, so there are no air trapped in the caliper. Otherwise it would be at the top portion of it, and it would be difficult or impossible to remove it from the system if I leave the caliper in this position and drain the fluid with the bleeding screw at the bottom. But as I mentioned, I replace the brake fluid in every year. It's in perfect condition. So in this video I'm not going to remove the rear wheel and replace the brake caliper, because yeah, it's not a fun for me. It's my responsibility to leave it as it's there. But when I replace the rear tire next time, I'm gonna show you in another video how to replace the brake fluid with this brake caliper removed and put it in the top position. The bleeding screw is 11 mm, so first step, I release it and tighten it again, just to prepare for the bleeding process. Next step is to remove the cap of the brake fluid reservoir and remove the old fluid with the syringe. Then let's fill some fresh fluid. Usually put the cap back because it reduces the moisture absorption during the bleeding process. I use the conventional way to bleed the system, and it's a bit difficult if you are alone, but I can manage it. It's important that you need to check the reservoir from time to time, just not to run empty, because in that case air goes into the system, you can start the whole process from the scratch. So, push the brake pedal, open the screw, close the screw, push the pedal, open the screw, close the screw, repeat it. According to the workshop manual, it's advised to flush the system with approximately 250 milliliters of brake fluid. So this reservoir is scaled up to 120. So I fill it up twice, and then I consider the bleeding process is finished. When you finished the bleeding, clean all the parts from the residual braking fluid, because it's pretty much a corrosive material and it can damage the painted surfaces. And tighten the bleeding screw to a torque of 12 Newton meter. Also check the free play of the brake pedal. It has to be between 2 and 5 millimeter, before the brake bites. It's around 5. You can make it a bit tightened, so you can reduce the free play, but be careful with it. When it's too tight, due to the thermal expansion, you would have issues with the rear brake, as I had once. I practically cooked the rear brake because I adjusted the brake pedal almost without free play. There was a minimum one, and due to some thermal effects, the rear brake started to grip all the time, so I had to replace the ABS sensor cable because the insulation melted and so on. So it's 5mm for me now, and as I mentioned, it's enough to switch on the ABS even on a paved road. This is the trace of brake fluid on painted material. So I accidentally left it and forgot to clean it. It was there for a few hours, and that was enough for the fluid to start damaging the painting.